Hello class, welcome to your Chapter 1 lecture, the Sociological Perspective Theory and Methods. Today we're going to talk about just sociological perspectives in this video, and we're going to have a few separate videos for theory and methods. So if you notice that we start on slide 5, or you can start in your chapter on page, looks like page 4. So the very first thing that we are going to talk about is the question about what sociology actually is. Now, sociology, I can give you a kind of technical response that it's a scientific study of human behavior. But what does that mean? Well, as a sociologist, what we ask and what's the center of the questioning in sociology is how do groups of people influence each other? How are groups influenced by society specifically? And when we do so, we try to take a sociological approach, which means that we're encouraging ourselves and others to ask whether the common sense beliefs that you thought always were true are actually true. So in doing so, we can often debunk what is a common sense belief. So you might be asking, well, what does that mean? Well, we might assume that we know that males and females behave in a certain way just because they're male, because they're born male. And a sociologist would question if that is actually something that is what you would consider to be innate, or is it something that you have learned? So a lot of times, a lot of the behaviors that we have, we assume to be kind of just innate or natural, right? What people might think of as boys act tough because that's who boys are, and that's the natural tendency. When in reality, sociologists have discovered that we expect males to behave more aggressively, and if we allow that type of behavior, encourage it, and foster it, then males as a whole will tend to act a little more aggressively than would females. So it's these kind of common sense ideas that with actual research, applying evidence and thinking about these questions, looking for evidence to support your hypothesis and affirming your hypothesis or not, is what sociologists actually do. So we'll get a little more into that later. Let's compare what we call basic and applied sociology. So basic sociology essentially means that you're analyzing aspects of society with the goal of gaining knowledge. The real goal of basic sociology is simply to gain knowledge for knowledge's sake. So sociologists are doing research so that they can add to the body of research. Whereas applied sociology, on the other hand, takes a slightly different perspective. And applied sociologists essentially believe that you should be learning about society in order to reform, benefit, enhance society in some way, so that you should have some type of goal in mind, some type of improvement. And a good example of that would be the NAACP. And you may have heard that term before, and the NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And this was founded by two historical sociologists, the first being W.E.B. Du Bois, who was our first African-American sociologist, and Jane Addams, who is probably the most well-known of the founding female sociologists. And the NAACP was founded in order to battle racism and combat the discrimination that was faced by blacks in the United States at that time and still continues today. Now, you might be asking why the two camps and what can we do to make a compromise? And that brings us to what we call public sociology. Now, the ASA, which is the American Sociological Association, is asserting that we need to have some type of middle ground between what we just call straightforward research and reform. And so they're trying to push, and they've been pretty successful at, promoting the idea that there should be a compromise between the two. We should be both doing research for academic sake and to do social reform. Now, what brings us to this concept of sociological imagination is that C. Wright Mills brings us this concept in 1955 of the sociological imagination. And it's very important to the construction of sociology because he places both us as individuals and us as a society in a certain perspective that can help us understand not only our own lives, but the lives of other people and the importance of sociology. So as you can see, the definition I put here is sociological imagination is the ability to see our particular problems and our successes as well are not unique to us, but the result of larger social trends. So he had, if we look at the quote, he had said, every individual lives from one generation to the next in some society. He or she lives out a biography, and he lives it out with some historical sequence. By the fact of his living, he contributes, however minutely, to the shaping of his society and its history, even as he is made by society and its historical push and shove. It's definitely a mouthful, but what exactly does that mean? Well, what it means is that we need to understand that who we are as individuals, it doesn't just have to do with our own identity and some type of internal force. That we are shaped very much by the time, the place that we live in, in other words, our geography. We're shaped by our race, our sex, our religion, our nationality. We're even shaped by the types of schools we go to and the friends that we have. So all of that shapes us and our perception of the world. But that every individual within the world also plays a role in shaping society, because society itself changes over time. The society that we live in is not the same society that Americans lived in 100 years ago, and will definitely not be the same society that Americans live in 100 years from now. If you think about who you are as an individual, and pull yourself out of your community, your time, and you place yourself 100 years back into a different community, into a different time. Maybe you are now living in a small Western colonization, and there is no access to the types of resources that you have today. Would you be this educated? Would you have the same type of job you have? Would you have the same type of beliefs that you have? And that's really where C. Wright Mills is talking about us as individuals. But not only us as individuals, he's talking about our society as a whole. So one way that we can understand, another way that we can understand the sociological imagination is thinking about some of the macro level forces that are shaping our own circumstances. And macro means big, by the way, and we'll go over that in a little bit. So one of the things that's shaping students' ability to be successful today is the economy. It's difficult to find a job, and despite getting an education and despite working hard and being smart and trying, it can be really challenging to find a job and be successful. Much more challenging than even 50 years ago. So if you are really looking for a job and you're trying hard and you've done everything in your own capability to find a job, it doesn't necessarily mean it's completely 100% your fault that you can't find one. So we have a few examples here of how you might understand your own place from more of a larger perspective and context, and place yourself within the context of society today. So if I were to say the economy is making it difficult to find a job, that is seeing your own situation in the context of the broader economy. You could also say something, sound like a sociologist, and say something like the macro level social forces of our economy are impacting my personal life. So the broad scale economy is impacting my own personal life. I'm not the only person with personal economic problems because it's the result of a larger social trend. So the larger social trend is that it's more challenging to find a job. And therefore, I'm not the only person with this particular problem. So I've given you a few examples, and we've talked about the sociological imagination. What I would like you to do now is to go ahead and finish this video and watch one more video. It's called A People's History of American Empire by Howard Zinn. And he's talking about an American empire, but what I would like you to do is to take a real look at how he expresses his own sociological imagination. He never talks about the term sociological imagination, but Howard Zinn is a renowned academic of our time, and so his understanding of his own social location in his time, in his life, and he's able to place himself within the context of his own society in such a way that is probably much more profound than most people around you would be able to do. So take a few minutes, watch this. It's actually narrated by someone, but they did an amazing job at mimicking his voice. Be forewarned, it's very monotone. So hopefully you'll be able to sit through it, listen to it carefully, and see if you can identify the sociological imagination. Thank you.